It's always a pleasure partnering with you. Yeah. All right. Okay, so I think I'm in control now. We'll see. And hello, and my name is Jesse Ketterman. I'm with University of Maryland Extension, and today I'm going to be talking to you about the ABCs of budgeting and saving. So we're going to talk about a couple different budgeting strategies, but we'll get to that here shortly. I do need to add that our programs are open to all where we receive federal funds through University of Maryland Extension, and as such, we need to notify our audience that our programs are open to all. And so, what are we going to do today? Today, we're going to talk about developing a spending plan slash budget and defining what that is. We're going to identify ways to track spending. We're going to talk about setting financial goals and creating a goal-based spending plan. Now, before I get started, as we do our programs, I need to collect data on the participants of our program. So in the chat box, I'm going to put uh, a link, and if you could just click on that link, and it's going to ask you whether you're male, female, ethnicity, race, and a couple other demographic questions that we need to collect when we do our programs. And as we do that, again, we're going to talk about the ABCs of budgeting. We're going to look at spending plans, budgets, ways to track spending, setting goals, and setting goal-based spending plans. So we're going to keep moving along, but if you'd complete that survey, I'd appreciate it. So we're looking here at the money cycle. And so when we're talking about developing a budget or a spending plan, there's several steps to that. So we're gonna need to track our spending. We're gonna need to set goals because our goals should reflect in our spending plans and budgets. Then we're going to create that plan, and then we got to see, are we sticking to that plan? So we need to track our spending again, and life happens. And when life happens, we need to adjust that plan. And so we're constantly in this cycle of tracking, setting goals, creating plans, tracking, and adjusting. And so we're going to go through each of those areas today. And I do need to give some credit to my colleague, Dorothy Knuckles, who I borrowed some elements of a presentation she does around this in this presentation today. So many thanks to Dorothy and her work that she put into this. And so what is a spending plan? And so when we think about spending plan, it's really looking at what is the map for our money. Um, and if we don't have a plan, how do we know where we're trying to go? And so developing a spending plan is a map. It's going to kind of give you an idea of where your money is going, and is it going in the areas that you want it to go in? Uh, again, it's a snapshot of what you will expect in terms of income and expenses, and also how you uh, spend and bring in money. And so, a lot of people don't realize um, how they are spending their money. And so, until you actually start to write things down, um, you think you have a plan, but until you look at it, then you notice where there might be some gaps and some places you can adjust, and also that your spending doesn't reflect your goals. So one of the things to think about is, where do you want to go with your financial situation, and where have you been? And so we all often talk about um, checking out what our net worth is. And so when I work with college age students, I still introduce this concept of net worth, and some of the students have a negative net worth. And I tell them that's okay. It doesn't matter that that's just where you're at right now. Where is it that you want to go? So you do have to kind of look ahead when you think about things. And we're going to talk about goals later in the presentation. So here's some reasons why someone might have a spending plan. All right, Zoom was I'm just checking some comments. Zoom was very slow and I wasn't seeing the slides or hearing in the beginning, but it seems like you're okay now. So if there's any other troubles, let me know. So why would somebody have a spending plan? because they need to know where their money goes. You need a spending plan to stay on track with your financial goals. And again, a lot of times we have a tendency to live day to day with our finances, and so we need to have some goals to figure out, okay, are our day to day behaviors matching up with our goals and where we're trying to go? And then it's also helps with planning. And I'm going to talk about two different types of budgeting. We're going to talk about monthly budgets, and then also a cash flow or a weekly type budget and why one might be advantageous to the other. And so again, the other people may have some other reasons why they would want to develop a spending plan. And if you wanted to post any reasons why you might want a spending plan, you can add that into the chat box. Um, a spending plan also helps us if we start thinking about, okay, I need to buy a car in the near future, or I need to save money for a house. Those are other reasons that you might want to develop a spending plan now so you can plan for the future later on. Some of you may have children and they're going to you want them to go to college at some point. So are you setting aside money for that? Those are all reasons that you want to have a spending plan now to prepare for later. And so spending recall exercise, this is just to get you thinking. If you have a piece of paper in front of you, I want you to write down on this piece of paper the last 20 things that you spent money on, whether it was cash, whether it was a credit card, whether it was a debit card, whether it was a bill you paid last night online. I want you to see how you do in terms of recalling the last 20 things that you spent money on. And not only that you spent money on them, but how much money did you spend on them? So I'm going to pause for a minute and let you think about that and let you make your list. And if you don't have a piece of paper in front of you, that's fine. Just kind of, do a recall uh, off the top of your head and just say, okay, I did this. And again, the second part of that is not just did you spend money, but how much did you spend? And then my follow-up to that is make a comment in the chat box with how you did. Did you remember everything? Did you partially remember things? Um, I couldn't tell you, that would be another answer. Um, so how many of you recall everything? Just a quick note in the chat. Recalled everything, didn't recall everything. Um, it's a good question to ask. Yeah, so we're seeing some. Yeah, I got, about five things, not all. A couple people remembered it all. Most can't recall all 20. Yeah. And that's what happens. We develop habits where we don't recall how we're spending our money. It's just impulse spending. And so, good little exercise to get you thinking about your spending because it's again, how you spend is an important part of budgeting and developing a spending plan. So now we're going back to our cycle, and the first step in that cycle is tracking spending. And so here we go. We need to know where we are going to create a route to where we are going. We need to know where we are to create a route to where we are going. So that's what we're trying to do when we're talking about tracking spending. We need to know where we are. And again, remember, start with tracking so that you can get your starting location. So you need to know where you're at before you can get started. Now, I'm sharing with you a document that is in this booklet called Building Wealth, and it's a great resource. And I'm going to post the link to this in the chat box if you wanted to do this. And this is one of two resources I'm going to share with you. But It's a printout from the Building Wealth booklet by the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas, and it has a worksheet that, again, is just a tool that you could use to start tracking all your spending. Now, do you need to print out this worksheet? No, there's several different ways, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. And then here's an example of how Gabby used it in the workbook. So uh, just a way to do that in this example. Again, are you paying cash, or are you charging? Are you paying it later? Um, a couple tips when you track spending. Again, rely on your records, not memory. And we saw that when we did our exercise. You don't remember everything you did. I'll even think about that. If I buy something when I'm in my vehicle, by the time I get home, I don't remember how much it was, right? So rely on records, not your memory. Decide how long you want to track. Now, if you're thinking about from a monthly perspective, it's good to track for a month, and then you can plan for the following month. And that's only because a lot of us think monthly in terms of how we pay our bills, right? Uh, you pay your mortgage, you pay your auto loan, whatever it may be, on a monthly basis. So 30 days is a good rule of thumb. But again, you can do it as long as you want, um, because you just need to get an idea of how you're spending your money when you start here. You also need to keep track of income too. Some of us it's kind of fixed, which means it stays the same. Others it's inconsistent. So depending upon, we might work overtime, we might make money, we might have a side job where we make extra money. So again, getting an idea of tracking your income is important. And then I'm going to share with you a template, but you may also have your own category. So um, the comment, you don't have to track them all. Um, Depending upon how you set the budget up for yourself, there are things that you're going to pay regardless, right? Your auto loan, you know how much that's going to be. But it's those little things that you don't, how much are you spending on eating out? Do you have habits like buying a coffee at McDonald's or Dunkin' Donuts or Starbucks in the morning? Those are things you really do need to keep a closer eye on and how you're doing in those areas. So here's the second tool I'm going to share with you, and this is from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau has a resource called the Your Money, Your Goals Toolkit. And in that toolkit covers a variety of financial topics. And so there's a couple different ways if you looked at tracking income and spending in those sections. They have a couple different tools you can use. This is just one of the tools. Again, they're tracking income here. They also have tools for tracking expenses. Um, but you do want to kind of track it more than once. Um, you want to have others on board. So if you have a family, um, having your significant other part of the discussion is important, as well as getting kids to understand the importance of money. If you don't share with them the challenges that we experience, how are they going to learn that? And one of the things I remember talking to a relative of mine after we graduated from college many years ago, we said, man, our parents took care of us, but they never really taught us about money. And so you end up learning it on your own. So it's good if you can engage your children in learning about money. So again, you also want to see what your spending looks like compared to your goals. So are your habits in line with what you're trying to accomplish and achieve? And remember, don't be too hard on yourself. We all have some habits that we like to change, and can we don't always have our behaviors in line with our goals. So don't be too hard on yourself. No, it's just an opportunity for you to improve as you move forward. And we talked about tracking income too. So I shared with you one tool. actually two tools with building wealth. So building wealth in your money, your goals. But there's lots of different ways you can track your income. There are apps. One of the places that I would send people if they're looking for apps, some of your banks will have apps that you can use to track budgets. Um, there are other apps out there. What I usually tell people is, if you search Nerd Wallet for financial apps, they usually have a top listing, and it's a pretty good source of information. Um, you can use a spreadsheet, create a spreadsheet in Excel or Excel sheet in Google and start again just writing things down, tracking it. You're going to need to use your receipts and bank statements to assist you in tracking. Some people like the old method of pencil and paper, and I've used that at different points in my life too. Just having a piece of paper to write down when I spend something. You can set up a bill calendar. I remember growing up, in our house, we had this calendar on the wall, and it had every aspect of our life in it. It had when our doctor's appointments were, when school was closed, and even when certain bills were due in the house. So, some people like to have that visual aspect of it, of having a calendar. And so this is just an example of the calendar version, and this is in that Your Money, Your Goals toolkit. And all you do, write down on the calendar uh, what days. This is set up where you can type everything in online if you want, or you can just print it out. But that's a tool that's out there and available to you. And so now you have this new information, right? You have a clearer picture of your spending. Are there spending leaks? And what a spending leak is, there's a couple different ways to look at spending leaks. And one is these are habits that you've developed over time. And so earlier I mentioned swinging by and going to get you a coffee in the morning. And those coffees, cost $5 or so, $5 plus, right? And so when you go through the line and do that, and you do that every day, that adds up pretty quickly. That would be a spending leak. Another example of a spending leak would be uh, fees that we pay on things. So if we have a habit of overspending our account and the bank charges us a fee, how can you fix that? That's a spending leak. That's money that's going out that you're not controlling. And and the other thing, and it's interesting, is my wife and I had a discussion about this the other night. We were signed up for an antivirus program, and it was set up where it automatically renewed. Well, we moved in a different direction with our antivirus protection, but that charge still went through. So that was a spending leak that, a lot of times we'll set up these automatic payments with different bills, but keeping up with that and keeping track of that can sometimes be difficult. Does your spending match your goals? And again, we're going to talk about that goal piece a little bit in shortly. Are you spending more than you make? And so if you don't track your spending, sometimes you don't know if you're spending more than you make. And then are there some areas that you can identify to lower your spending? So I pulled this from a tool um, called All My Money, and it's one of my extension partners in another state. Um, but it gives you an idea of how much money over the course of a year little habits can make. And so if you do one movie a week, that's $500. What could you do if you had an additional $500? If you go to a vending machine, one snack for 260 work days, $260. And so you can go on down, five purchases a month for apps, $120. But when you do that, those things add up. Once you start to get a picture of how you're spending your money, that starts to add up. So now we're getting into the goals, right? Tracking gives you information, and when you have this information, are your behaviors aligned with your goals? And so sometimes once we start to develop that picture, we can make some changes to align the two. And then again, it's you got to be ready to make that change. Like, if you're not ready to make a change, me talking about budgeting is not going to get you where you need to be. And most of you are on here and you're ready to make that change, which is great. So when we talk about goals, they should be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. And so I'm going to give you some examples of the differences of the two there. So let me move to that. So here you can see an example. This is from that Your Money, Your Goals toolkit. Well, I'd like to buy a new television, right? Well, that's more of a hope and a dream than it is a strong goal. I will save $400 and purchase a new television in 6 months. Now you have some specific numbers that go along with that goal in a time frame, and you could even break that down and make it even stronger by having some action items to say, I'm going to save a certain amount of money every week over the next 6 months, right? So you can even make this a little bit stronger, but you can see the difference between the hope and dream there and the strong goal. Similarly there, I want to get out of credit card debt, right? I'll pay down $1,000 of my debt over the next 18 months. And so again, you need to be specific with your plan to have a nice, strong goal. So there you go. Those are two good examples. So in that Your Money, Your Goals toolkit, they have some resources on setting goals. This is called the Putting Goals into Action tool. And so if you wanted to develop some tools, now the nice thing about these worksheets is you can apply these to your financial situation, but you can also apply them to different aspects of your life. But with this worksheet here, you could type in what your goal is, and then you can make some steps for achieving that goal. So list, the steps it takes to achieve that goal. Are there resources that you need? What is the time frame that you have associated with? And then they also add this who's your accountability? Who's going to hold you to this, right? So sometimes we need somebody else to kind of keep us on track. And so adding that column is great. Can I make it a little bigger? No, but you can click on that link, and I can also put I can put this specific tool in the chat box because I have it open on another window. So if you clicked on this link here, that should take you specifically to that tool. And again, there's a couple of the link I sent earlier with the Your Money, Your Goals has a whole set of tools that you can use with your financial situation. So, matter of fact, it's 43 tools and handouts that would support your financial well-being. So now you've tracked your spending, you know where you're trying to go, you set your goals. Now you need to create your plan, right? And so this is what are you trying to do as you look ahead? And so let's get into that. And again, when you tie your goals into your spending plan, you're gonna see that you might have to make some adjustments. So if you're focusing on paying down debt, you may have a little less going into the savings, so that you can get that debt paid down, so that you can focus more money in savings. And then again, another example of an adjustment. If you have a large purchase you want to make, well, maybe you need to cut down on some of your entertainment for a little while so that you can put that money away. So let's do a little interactive activity here. We're going to talk about developing a budget. And step one, start with the money you make, or what would the I represent? What would the I represent there? Start with the money you make. That is the same as income, yes. And list blank, OB. What would be the OB? Yes, Rebecca's on it there. Well, obligations. And then you're going to determine your, starts with an E, expenses, yes. And as you determine your expenses, you consider discretionary spending. Man, you guys are experts. Ooh, I clicked too. And there may be some other steps that tie into your particular situation. Um, and then you gotta pay yourself, right? So you might have short-term goals. Um, you report all the links. Yes, I'll put all the links in again at the end of our session. Um, you're going to have again, you have to focus on your short-term, intermediate, and long-term goals, and then you do the math, and you should end up with a budget, and so you want to kind of account for all of your money where it's going, and so that's why we say step seven would be your ending balance should be zero, right? You've taken all your income and you've assigned it to a specific area that again ties into your expenses and ties into your goals. And as again, you develop your spending plan, don't forget to include savings. And if you have major purchases coming up, um, ideally you want to get to a point, even like with automobiles, if you can start saving for your next automobile before you need it, that's a great way. Even if you don't have the money to save up to purchase it in full, at least you have money for the down payment, and it also saves you um, on the money, the interest that you're paying the bank. You do want to have an emergency fund, and there's different guidance you may receive on that. Uh, Typically, the rule of thumb is you want to have 3 months of your expenses in emergency fund, and so they kind of use that as a guide because 3 months of expenses would allow you, let's say something happens and you lose your job, you're going to be able to cover expenses for 3 months until you can get another job. So you're going to hear different people. Some people might say something smaller, shorter. Some people may say cover expenses for a year, but the 3 month rule of thumb is pretty good. Um, and don't think of 3 months because we all experience different financial situations in life. So if you haven't started an emergency fund, that's fine. Set a small goal. Say, hey, over the next couple of months, I want to get $500 set up an emergency fund or $1,000. Starting small is fine. You just know you want to build up to that 3 months of expenses. Don't forget about your retirement. I know all of us are thinking about that. And just again, make sure that whatever you decide, the important part is to make sure you're planning for the future. And so here's an example of a monthly budget. And again, this is from the Building Wealth book. If you didn't get the link earlier, I'm gonna post it again at the end of the presentation. But you can see from the Building Wealth example here, we have Gabby's budget, and you can see she has her current income, her changes that she's going to make as she goes into the following month, and what her new budget would be. And some examples may also track your projected budget for the following month. But basically, it's taking the information you collected, developing a plan for your current situation, and then keeping track of that along the way as are you staying within the framework you developed. There is a sample of this budget in the Building Wealth booklet at the end. So if you wanted to print it out and use this, uh, you could do that as well. Now, there's also something called a cash flow budget. Now, the cash flow budget you'll see in the Your Money, Your Goals materials in that link. And the cash flow budget is important if you're struggling and you're trying to figure out how do I just get through the month when things are changing every week. Using a cash flow budget is great. And I'm going to put it to paper here. So here's an example of a cash flow budget. And what you'll notice, the difference between a weekly cash flow budget and a monthly budget is our income and expenses when times are tight don't always play out perfectly. And so you can see here, even though the first week the income was $889, their expenses led to 1,250. So they already started out in the hole prior to getting to the second week. But in the end, if you looked at this from a monthly perspective, well, they did all right. They have $361 left over. So sometimes we need to look at the timing of our money as well when we're looking at budgets. And so if you need to look at the timing, a weekly cash flow budget is going to be a better alternative for you. And so when you look at things here, you're thinking, well, here's that housing. I have to pay my rent $845 at the beginning of week one. Well, what strategies do I have? Well, maybe I can work with my landlord and pay twice a month, right? If I pay half in week one, half in week three, how does that impact your weekly cash flow? In this position, in this scenario, it would help them a lot if they were able to do that. Now, not every landlord's going to be open to that, but that's a strategy. The other thing I talk to people about too is, um, you know, you can work with utility companies and credit card companies and adjust when your monthly payment is due. So if you reach out to them and say, hey, look, right now it's scheduled to come out on the 10th, you're expected to have your payment the 10th. Can we move that to later in the month? They will work with you on that. So those are some things to think about if you start looking at your cash flow from a weekly basis. And again, there's an example of the weekly cash flow budget in the Your Money, Your Goals materials. So then I wanted to jump a little bit into, okay, well, where should my money go? What is the general guidance or the general rule? And so there's this 50/20/30 rule. So 50% of your pay should go towards your needs, 20% to savings and debt. And again, that's going to vary a little bit too, right? If you have a mortgage payment, it may slide up a little bit, but this is kind of a general guidance. And we know from a savings perspective, I think, you're looking at 10 to 15% of your income should go to savings. And then 30% is towards your wants. The Your Money, Your Goals materials, I put them in a link earlier, and I will share them again after a few more slides. But this is the 50/30/20 rule, and so it gives you a general idea of where your money should be going. So now we're back to tracking our spending. So we created that plan. We created that whether that how are we going to spend our money over the course of the month. Now we're seeing how did we do? How did we do? Yes, anything that's going towards retirement would count towards that. Yes. I was looking at the question if those didn't see that is 10% do your entire retirement contributions and your 10% savings to yourself. Yes, yes. Again, and you want to push to the 15%, but you starting at 10 is a good place. So we created our plan. We're back to tracking again. Are we staying within our plan? And this will tell us if we have one area that we spent more than we thought we were going to. And so here's some ideas when you're thinking about daily: record your saving, sharing, and spending. Uh, Collect your change. There's lots of other little things that we can do. If are there other strategies you can take to increase your income? Can you have a yard sale? Can you help the neighbor? There's lots of different ways to do that. Um, Weekly ideas, if you wanted to kind of track, some people recommend an envelope system. And basically, an envelope system, if I have, I don't know, say $100 in my dining out fund, once that envelope's empty, I'm not going to dine out anymore. So it's more of an accountability way. And that's one of the challenges we have when we have credit and debit cards, is that money just disappears and you don't think about it, but it's easy to access. And so we have a tendency to spend more when we use our credit cards than we do if we have cash, because once our cash is gone or it starts to get low, you start to become aware of your spending. So we talked about tracking and reviewing that monthly. And we talked earlier about including other members of your family. So when you're looking at how the money was spent in a given month, sitting down with your significant other, sitting down with your children and showing them is an important part of that as well. When you do well, celebrate successes. So if you accomplish your goals, some people like to build in incentives, right? If we as a family can stay within this, we'll take this other money and we'll put it towards a vacation. And once we get a certain amount, we're all going to go on vacation. And so it creates some excitement around the budgeting process. Which leads us to adjusting our plan, right? So once we've tracked, we may find that we overspent one area or underspent in another, and so we have to readjust and go back, because we want to account for all of our money. We want to know where it's all going and have a plan for all of our money. And so when we overspend or underspend, we got to adjust that plan. And so what are some of the adjustments we can make? We can increase our income, right? So here's some ideas there. Sell something, garage sales, part-time second job, workforce development, thinking about how can I move to another position to make more money, uh, decrease in expenses. So again, can you conserve and use less? Can you use less gas, go on less drive, consolidate your trips, right? Little things can add up. Are there things that you can renegotiate? Are there things that you do that you don't need? Um, it's interesting because at times, and especially true now, I think about eating out. Eating out has become very expensive. The prices increased significantly over the last couple of years. And so sometimes it's also making decisions about what is it that we eat, right? Sometimes we rush, but certain items cost, $2 or $3 more than another item. So if we're just trying to get something to eat to satisfy hunger, well, maybe we get the more conservative item, and again, that's an extra $2 or $3 that you can use somewhere else. Making adjustments, again, we have to be real with ourselves. Don't set up false expectations. And that goes back to the tracking and planning. Um, we all have things that we can change, and again, don't be hard on yourself. Creating a budget should be a process, not a negative process. And so that's kind of important too. I have a resource here that our colleagues, Utah State University, have called PowerPay. So I know some of us are dealing with debt and are trying to kind of come up with a strategy on how we would get out of debt. And they have this tool called PowerPay. And what happens with PowerPay, I'm going to play the video and I'll explain a little more after that. So let me see if I can play this video.
Are you buried in debt and can't get ahead? Do you know how much you owe and what the interest rates are? Utah State University Extension's PowerPay program is a free online service that will give you the tools to help you organize and eliminate debt. Discover how quickly you can become debt-free and how much you can save in interest costs by following a personalized debt elimination plan. In order for PowerPay to work, you must first quit adding to the debts you want to eliminate. 2. Commit to keep the total amount of money going to debt payments consistent until all are repaid. And 3. When a debt is paid off, add that payment amount toward another debt. It will take focus and dedication, but PowerPay works. Utah State University Extension is pleased to provide this debt management tool without cost to consumers worldwide. Log in to start gaining control of your financial future today.
So this is a tool for you to use. It's called powerpay.org. And as the video mentioned, you can put in the debt that you have, and then you can run different scenarios as to how you want to pay that debt off. So what is the advantage of paying off the highest interest rate debt first? What is the advantage of paying off the lowest amount of debt first? You can run different scenarios with it. It's a great tool. I shared it a lot in my presentation. So if you do have debt and you want to kind of develop a plan and a strategy, using PowerPay would be great. And so here are those two tools that I mentioned today. I'm going to post them back in the chat box. There is the Your Money, Your Goals, but both have a lot of great information that you can use for developing a spending plan or a budget and tracking your expenses. A great resource. So can I speak on CDs? I guess there's different instruments, different places you can put your money, and it depends upon what your goals are as to where you would put your money. And so without going too far into depth, I'm going to put my email in the chat box, and you can email me specifically about that, and I can get you some information. But basically, CDs are kind of a short to midterm place to put your money. You think about checking accounts, savings accounts. I'm kind of working my way up: checking accounts, savings accounts, money market accounts. Then you go to CDs, and then from CDs you get into different types of bonds and stocks and mutual funds. And so you see CDs kind of falls there in the middle. You get a better interest rate than you do on a money market or a savings account, but the money's kind of tied into the CD for a period of time. So that's the CDs is not a long-term place to put your money. It's more of a short to medium-term place. And any of the MSRP team is welcome to comment on that as well if they would like. But again, the point here is when we're talking about budgeting and spending plans, remember it's a cycle. You got to track, set your goals. You got to make sure you have goals. When I talk about goals, I talk about, think of your GPS. If I was going to say, let's go to, I don't know, Nashville, Tennessee, we're going to drive there. We're going to put in our GPS, and it's going to give us specific steps to get to Nashville, Tennessee. That's exactly what goals should do for us. They should give us the specific steps of how to get there along the way. And just like when we have our GPS, we make a wrong turn, that happens in our financial situation. We just have to adjust, get back on course, and have some new steps to get where we're trying to go. So remember, set your goals, create a plan, track your spending, and you're going to have to make adjustments. And life happens along the way, and be prepared for that. And there's my contact information, but I will answer any questions that I can see in the chat box, and I'm sure the rest of the team here is going to help guide that and share any additional thoughts.
Well, thank you, Jesse. This has been